Economic collapse confirmed. Jobless claims are growing exponentially. For the last 2 months, we have been going through a global health problem and an economic crisis at the same time. Many people alive today have never seen anything like this because right now many economies are coming to a halt, and what is materializing in our eyes will be bigger than the Great Depression. This will end up being the most severe economic collapse in the history of the world. The stock market is already crashing at a pace that has not been seen in recent years. This has been so severe to a point where trading had to be halted several times in the last 2 weeks. The real estate industry is also at the verge of collapsing. This time, the crash will be bigger than what we had back in the 2008 financial meltdown. At the same time, millions of Americans are losing their jobs, and when all this is factored into the current economic turmoil, we have a perfect economic bomb that is about to blow up in our faces. This is just the beginning of another Great Depression. Just like other nations, the United States has been going through a historic health crisis that has impacted the economy in a big way. Right now, many businesses have been closing. Americans have been losing their jobs at a rate never seen before. Because of this, the searches for unemployment benefits have skyrocketed because of these massive layoffs across the manufacturing and service sector. In the next few weeks, the number of jobless people is expected to skyrocket. The current economic crisis can easily culminate in a depression similar to what we had back in 1929. This means that the number of people who will lose their jobs might skyrocket by a whopping 20% within a short time. During the 2008 financial crisis, more than 660,000 people lost their jobs. This looks nothing compared to the ugly trend that is developing today. This economic crisis will soon turn to a depression. This might end up being the most severe economic meltdown in modern history. Right now, millions of Americans will lose their jobs and others are having their working hours reduced significantly. This shows how fast things can change, considering the fact that just a few months ago we had a robust economy. More than 160 million Americans were employed at the peak of Trump's economic boom. Goldman Sachs is confirming the ugliness of what's happening to our economy now because their analysis is showing that consumer spending is dropping at a historic rate. And a survey is showing that every week the manufacturing sector is producing catastrophic data. The monthly economic activity has plummeted. Unemployment claims are increasing every day. This shows how severely the economy has been impacted by this slowdown. Hotels and restaurants have been severely hit. According to the American Hotel and Lodging Association, the occupancy of various hotels has declined by 90%. Hotels in hotspots like New York shutting down all their operations. Many states have already banned dining in bars and restaurants, although deliveries and takeouts are still available. Recent data shows that across the U.S., restaurants have seen a 40 to 90% decline in their operations. This will only continue getting worse. At the same time, airlines have experienced the biggest slowdown in history. In April and May, United Airlines announced a 50 to 70% decline in their activities. Delta Airlines have experienced a 70% drop in their operations. Many of the workers in these airlines have been laid off. It looks as if the whole global economy is coming to an abrupt halt. Literally every industry has been disrupted. Major events have also been cancelled. Services that involve mass gatherings have been limited. Right now, sports leagues, NBA, NCAA, MLB, and NASCAR have been postponed or cancelled. Also, thousands of retail stores are closing all over the U.S. Brands like Apple and Microsoft have completely closed their stores all over the United States. This economic slowdown will significantly affect the U.S. GDP. In the first quarter of the year, economists are predicting that we will have up to 14% decline in the GDP. This kind of economic decline has not been seen for many years. Many economists are predicting that if the current problem is not addressed on time, the economy will suffer and potentially plunges to another depression globally. Many nations have lowered their GDP growth estimations. The Eurozone has also been affected by this global panic. Economists are estimating that the Eurozone will experience an economic downturn in the next 2 quarters. The decision to shut down air travel, close most of businesses, has become a reality in many nations. The US has already banned all travel from Europe. This has turned out to be the biggest business disruption in many decades. The effect on the global economy is turning out to be exponential because supply chains are being shocked. Many emerging markets are closing. At the same time, the US economy has been debt-driven, and this has further worsened the situation. The stock market has been plummeting at a historic rate. Right now, we have one of the biggest market crashes in history, and the 2020 market crash will forever be mentioned alongside the 1929 and 1987 market crashes. Wealth worth trillions of dollars has been wiped out from the markets. Economists are still warning that the worst is still to come. In coming weeks, the market will continue tumbling because of this global panic. Despite the efforts by the Federal Reserve to pump trillions of dollars into the market, the stock market is still crashing. Right now, we have bigger collapses than what we had back in the 2008 financial crisis. For example, the Dow has dropped by more than 18% last week. This is the worst weekly performance since the 2008 economic meltdown. Overall, the Dow Jones Industrial Average has collapsed by more than 35% from the all-time highs we had at the beginning of the year. Throughout the history of the United States, we have never seen a similar collapse. This market crash is happening at a ferocity that has never been seen before. Right now, the gains we have had in the market for the last 3 years have all been wiped out. Based on the historical valuation ratios, the stock market will have to fall further before the prices start rising again. Right now, the whole United States economy is in great trouble as this economic meltdown continues. While the stock market is crashing, the U.S. financial institutions are also in trouble. Last week, some of the clearing firms were unable to meet their capital requirements, forcing the exchange to step in and involve some of the emergency protocols to help in auctioning the firm's portfolios. This might be the beginning of trouble in the financial sector, just as it was in the 2008 financial crisis when Lehman went bankrupt. In the midst of this economic meltdown, we have the biggest corporate debt bubble in history, and all indicators are pointing out that this debt bubble is about to burst. At the same time, the Federal Reserve has been pumping more cash into the economy. Look, this is just making the U.S. debt bubble bigger. In the middle of this economic meltdown, the oil prices have also fallen to historic lows. This has become a big threat to many American oil companies, which are at the verge of collapse right now. Jobless fillings have been rising exponentially because thousands of people are losing their jobs every day. Many people are now applying for unemployment insurance because companies are suspending their operations. In the process, they're laying off thousands of workers. Since most people live paycheck to paycheck, it will be impossible for most of them to pay their bills if this crisis continues for months. Americans are about to face the most difficult economic times since the Great Depression. This shock to the American economy is bigger than what was expected. This crisis will cost the economy trillions of dollars. Millions of American people will suffer in a big way. This economic meltdown is becoming a financial suicide. The question is, how will Americans survive this? It is very clear that the United States and the world at large is going through uncharted waters, both economically and socially. The global supply chains have already been disrupted. The whole economy is at the verge of a total collapse. Through the quantitative easing program, the Federal Reserve is pumping more cash into the economy. This is creating a bigger problem. Right now, we have a debt problem, which is adding gasoline to this fire of economic meltdown. Printing of more cash by the Federal Reserve will bring more trouble to the economy. This will result to unprecedented levels of inflation as the dollar loses its value. Every day, many Americans are losing their jobs. Economists are saying that this will continue for the foreseeable future. We're in the middle of an economic meltdown. This means that we will end up having unemployment levels similar to what we had during the Great Depression.